Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending this month's Funk Biogeography seminar. Before we begin, there are a few announcements I want to make on behalf of the Society. If you're interested in learning more about the technical aspects of our field, or are interested in exploring topics related to microclimates or reconstructing altitudinal shifts, we have three upcoming workshops scheduled later this year on these topics in April and June. Members do pay a slightly lower registration fee. And if you're interested in becoming a member and the benefits it gets you, you can learn all about this on our website, biogeography.org. The next biannual conference will be held in our house in January of 2026. And the conference website is now live and linked to the society website. And for those interested in attending, some key dates to keep in mind are abstract submissions open June 1st, and standard registration will begin will run through November 1st through December 15th. And if you're interested in submitting a workshop or symposium proposal, the deadline to do this by is April 30th. Like always, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the talk. And if you have a question, you can either uh, put it in the chat box, or if you want to ask it live, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. And yeah, thank you again for coming to this month's Funk Lecture, and I will pass it over to Marta to introduce the speaker.
Thank you so much, Raymond, for kicking us off today. My name is Marta Jarzyna, and I'm the Vice President for Public Affairs and Communications at the International Biogeography Society. And today it is my immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Sidney Gouveia to our Funk Biogeography Seminar Series. Dr. Gouveia is a professor at the Federal University of Sergipe in Brazil. He holds a master's degree in ecology and conservation from the same university at which he currently works, the Federal University of Sergipe. I hope I'm pronouncing it somewhat correctly. And he also holds a PhD in ecology and evolution from the University of Goiás. During his PhD, he was also a fellow at the Museum of Natural Sciences in Madrid. Dr. Gouveia's work focuses on various aspects of macroecology, but he's particularly interested in the biophysical and physiological mechanisms that drive species distribution, species richness, trait variation, and so on. And beyond his academic and professional pursuits, I found somewhere that he is also a harmonica enthusiast. So we have a scientist and a musician today, which is great. So please help me welcome Dr. Gouveia to our Funk lecture series. We are excited to hear about your work, Sidney, and the floor is yours.
Okay, can I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
Share. Okay, can you hear it?
Yes, we can see it. Great. Go ahead.
Okay, first, I want to thank IBS for the opportunity to share our work. Thank you very much. And of course, the audience for listening. Thank you. As Marta introduced me, I'm Sidney Gouveia from the University of Sergipe, Brazil. I'm speaking from this little warm and nice corner of the world. And these ideas are the results of the collaboration with several researchers, especially Professor Juan Rubalcaba from Spain and my students, Saulo, Luis, and Marcos, a former student. So I want to talk about ecogeographical rules, which is a very discussed subject in biogeography. And I'm sure everybody in the audience, or most people in the audience, have heard about it. Ecogeographical rules are emergent patterns, variation in organisms' features in response to biogeographic factors. And some of them involve physical traits of organisms, like size and shape, for instance. And the explanation for them also involves physical processes, such as heat and mass transfer, which are all related to the field of thermodynamics, right? But most discussion around ecogeographical rules is most about its ruliness. I mean, if it's a rule or not, or if it's general or not. And this has been mainly approached through a kind of a vote counting, which is testing multiple species or lineages and check if they apply or not, and eventually hoping to have a general answer for that. Okay, but for me, the most interesting about them is the mechanisms, regardless if it happens to occur, in 50 or 51% of the cases. Because I think that by focusing on the mechanisms, we can accommodate a tremendous physiological diversity of organisms and eventually be able to get a more colorful picture of macroecological phenomena, right? So I like to discuss two insights on ecogeographical rules based on this particular mechanistic physical perspective. One of them is about Allen's rule. It states that the length of appendages, such as beak, ears, tails, and legs, increase with temperature. Okay. However, Allen's original work told nothing about mechanisms, just the empirical pattern, right? The mechanisms we know now that says that longer appendages causes greater surfaces from where heat dissipates was apparently suggested by Per Scolander in the 60s when studying insulative properties of fur. It turns out that this explanation was reproduced by other studies from the 60s onward and taken for granted in the literature ever since. However, I think it has at least one contradiction in it. We know from geometry that as the length increases, most three-dimensional objects, for most three-dimensional objects, the surface increases to its square, right? But also the volume increases into its cube. And it may not seem to, but this also works for elongated objects such as appendages. So the surface area relative to the volume actually decrease in heat, and the heat dissipation is usually exceeded by heat retention, right? And you may be thinking that this is the very idea behind Bergman's rule. It's another traditional or the most commonly studied geographical rule. And it's the same mechanism, and this mechanism attributed to Bergman's rule actually poses a contradiction to Allen rules. Because I just said, even in elongated object, volume increases faster than its surface, right? If you take a look at this example, this was AI generated images, but the values are real, and the calculation of the surface in volume is also real based on the allometric equation. If you take a look at this example, an increase in 10% of the length, right? The surface will increase, but the volume will also increase. And it will increase more. And in fact, the surface to volume ratio will be lower, okay? In fact, it becomes 10% lower with increase in length, in 10% length, right? So if the object has a lower surface to volume ratio, it actually retains more heat than it dissipates, right? This is the very rationale of Bergman's rule applies here too for the parts of the animal, not only for the whole animal, right? Of course, there are some cases that an increase in surface involves little increase in volume. This is the case of flat objects, and we may think that ears, for example, work this way. So eventually, we may have this process based on the dissipation that has been proposed for these later decades, working for such particular cases, right? So eventually, we may have different processes occurring, right? And this is what I was talking about, of embracing physiological diversity. I mean, things may be more complex than we want them to be in general in macroecology, okay? So if not because of the surface, what then would explain the many organisms have longer appendages at warmer regions? Well, I think it's because of the length itself. And this model I'm suggesting is, I said it is inspired in Fourier's law of heat conduction, which determines how the heat flows from a hot to a cold end of an object, right? And it says that longer object, the longer the object, the greater the temperature difference, and the more heat will flow across it, and the more heat will be lost because every object has insulation inefficiency, right? Even with fur, the heat is lost. So if we take this example, the heat flows across this leg, and while he's moving, the blood, of course, this is not the same, right? The structure of a regular object is not the same as the animal appendage, because and that's why I said that it was inspired for his law of heat conduction, because in animals, of course, heat flows actively, right, through the circulatory system. But still, the longer the object, the greater the temperature difference and the higher the heat loss. And actually, there are many physiological facts that support this reasoning. For example, the temperature in the arteries is higher always than in the veins, because heat is systematically lost throughout the course of the blood flow, right? This is also related to the fact that the temperature at the extremities tends toward air temperature. Inclusively, this is why, for example, frostbite happens at fingertips and toes and ears, right? Well, I know that most because of movies, because we don't have frostbite at all here in Sergipe, right? But so this explanation needs the idea that the heat is produced in some part of the body and flows towards extremities, toward colder ends, which are the tips of the appendages, right? In the particular case of mammals, regular heat production, which we called non-shivering heat production, takes place at brown adipose tissue. So which are specific fat cells distributed at thoracic region, right? So the longer the appendage, the greater its distance from the body core to and the greater also the temperature difference that is made across its length, right? And so more heat is lost. And as I mentioned, this is the case for mammals because birds works a bit different from that, right? Birds produce heat, thermogenic heat in the muscle tissue, and but the most of the evidence for Allen's role in birds comes from structures that has little or no muscular tissue. So the reasoning applies as well. Okay, we can discuss this a bit more at the end of the seminar, right? Right. So this is the hypothesis that we are proposing, that the heat is produced in the thoracic region, the core of the body, most in this region, and the heat flows through distant appendage or distant regions from the body core, and heat is lost. And the longer the appendage are, the greater the difference, and this pumps heat toward the tips, and this makes the heat to be lost because of the insulative inefficiency, right? So what we did here was to try to assemble a data set and to contrast the dominant hypothesis involving surface area with hours of length using interspecific data, which is the only available for this, right? So we used proportion and the dimension of body parts available in the literature to estimate the leg surface. And we did it using many different existing equations for that. There are many equations that measure the surface of structure, and we employ all of them. All of them are based on the mass and length of the structure, and the result is the same for any measure, right? And what we found is that there were only evidence for supporting the hypothesis that the length affect the heat loss, or the association, the length with the environmental temperature, right? Specifically for medium-sized mammals, but not for surface at all, for no data subset. So from this, at least for this limbs, that was what we had at this moment, and at least for this set of species, we rejected the effect of surface, and we kept the effect of length only, right? So what we suggest here is that appendage length is optimized in this Allen's rule, but not for the surface. Maybe it is for the length itself, because the temperature gradient that is longer appendage creates favor greater heat loss, right? However, it's interesting to note that all evidence of Allen's rule comes from measurements of appendage length. So our hypothesis has no conflict with existing evidence at all, right? So nothing changes in terms of validity or evidence. But as we propose a new mechanism or different mechanism for it, if it's true, of course, we can think of many implications for the understanding, especially of the understanding of evolution of body shape from this mechanistic point of view, right? Well, this is the first insight. The second insight I like to share with you regards and this is a really quick one, is about the variation of skin resistance to water loss in anurans, right? Well, almost a decade ago, we proposed this study that suggested that body size gradient in anurans is driven by environmental water loss, by some measure of aridity or something like that, right? And a few years later, we also proposed a theoretical model to predict which species should exhibit a gradient in body size based on a physical model of water transfer. So this is a model equation of water transfer based on Fick's law of water diffusion. And this equation involves body size, mass, and surface. And another aspect that is the skin resistance, or the total resistance to dehydration, that is related to the skin resistance to dehydration, right? So we used a differential equation to determine the sensitivity of the species to variation in size. But we also got the sensitivity to skin resistance, right? This, if we combine these two equations and assign different values of mass or body size or body mass in this case, and total resistance. And in this plot, so each dot around this plot is a combination of body mass and total resistance. Okay. And from it, we can see that there are some combinations where species that has this combination are more sensitive to size, which is this darker area. And which species are more sensitive to skin resistance. And in fact, this area is much larger than the darker area. So if species are distributed around this lighter area, they may be more subject to exhibit gradient in skin resistance, right? So theory in this case suggests a possible geographic gradient in skin resistance to dehydration. But at that time, we only tested for the body size. We didn't test for the total resistance or the skin resistance because we had no data about it. But now we were able to test it. But as the previous example, we only have information at the species level, right? And we approached it interspecifically using regular phylogenetic analysis, right? And we used information at the species level for this about 130 species. Information about body size or body mass, skin resistance, and some other covariables that might be relevant here. They include, for instance, the experimental method. There are two different methods to estimate the skin resistance based on the mass, which is gravimetric method, and based on the difference in humidity levels in the chamber, which is the hygrometric method. Okay, and also the microhabitat. That is where the species live, on the trees, on ground, on water. And we used regular standard phylogenetic comparative methods, right? And guess what? We found a significant relationship of skin resistance and aridity index, right? And also we predicted in that study of 2019, this relationship is depends on the microhabitat of the species, being more specific, more salient in tree dwellers, arboreal species. And you can see that most of aridity decreased towards high values. So more arid areas are those with lower values, right? So most species that has higher skin resistance are usually concentrated at areas of high aridity or low water content in the atmosphere. Okay, so this might be actually a new trait gradient among endurance, right? And it came from this investigation of the theory of this derivation of the theory of the mechanistic models applied to this particular case. So the more interesting thing here is that we were only able to consider this gradient because theory suggested it, right? And this is a really nice aspect of mechanistic models that I like to emphasize here. That is the potential. They have a great potential to suggest unseen patterns, right? We didn't see it just by looking around, by traveling around regions, because we can see this feature of skin resistance. But by using a theoretical model to delve into it, we could spot it. This is the nice thing for me to in this particular case. And this capacity of theoretical models to suggest new patterns and that can lead you to come up with other new insights. It's a very interesting aspect of this mechanistic approach, and inclusively in philosophy of science, it's called the heuristic value of the theory, right? If we explore more models like this, we can come up with many more others new insights like this, right? That's it. I think I'm done. I think we have enough time for questions and comments. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Sidney. This is great. Are there any questions? I can read them off from the Q&A box. If you have any questions, please put them in there, or as Raymond said, feel free to raise your hand. We will monitor all the buttons here. But so perhaps kick us off as we are waiting for questions from the audience. First of all, really nice talk, Sidney. I really enjoyed it, and you're absolutely right. This ability of of the theoretical models to suggest new patterns in macroecology is really cool, because I feel like we have been doing it the other way around, right? In macroecology, so much of macroecology is to first detect and quantify the pattern and then try to explain it in some way. It takes an opposite approach, which frankly I feel like is more prevalent in sciences in general, right?
Yeah,
So
there was a time in macroecology that we were looking only for those general patterns for the surface, but I think we are moving on from this stage, right? I think we need to look at the nuances, the variation. Things are not that simple. Maybe things are not that simple. So we need to delve into these details to try to uncover things.
Okay, great. So yes, we have some questions. First, Clover, yes, the recording will be available. We will post it on our YouTube channel. So you can take a look at our channel when you want, and it should appear within days. But some questions from the audience, from Suzanne Renner. Great talk. In plants, allometry is so understudied, yet volume and surface play a huge role in evaporation. Can you comment on that? Can you comment on I guess plants in this case and evaporation?
Yeah, I think I'll stick in the first comment that allometry in plants is so understudied, and this works for me too. I know very little about plant physiology, but I think that for plants the bigger problem is that they have a huge phenotypic plasticity. It's different from animals that we can have a dwarf individual just because. And plants, if the plant lives or establishes in a very dry or hot region, it may just don't grow like an animal does. So I think the greater problem of analyzing or looking to this sort of patterns with plants is to deal with the phenotypic plasticity.
Thanks, Sidney. A question from Fabricio Villalobos. Thanks for the talk, Sidney. How other traits would you think may fall within that framework? For example, similar to skin resistance, what other hidden trait gradients might you expect?
Well, there are many. I think shape is one of them. Just telling from the equation, that I just showed. We have area over mass, and this is somehow related to body shape, and shape alone may have some interesting patterns. Inclusively, there are some studies that shows that, but there are so many aspects of the physiology of water balance, of energy balance, beyond those geographical rules that may be uncovered. I don't know. The most difficult is to be able to translate this relationships into this kind of a model, of simple model that we luckily came up with, because some factors are much more variable, much more difficult to describe with simple physical laws like this, and we need to work them much more. For an example, for instance, is Bergmann's rule. Apparently it's a very simple pattern in process, but when we put together the whole set of processes involved, metabolism and conduction and convection and everything, the predictions about it, it's much more complicated than that we used to expect from a linear relationship with temperature. Inclusively, Fabricio is a great friend. I talked with him a few minutes ago, actually, and we have collaborated in several studies, and one of them is about the allometry of surface area and the mass of bats, led by Juan Rubalcaba, that shows that this complexity that the Bergmann's rule has for the particular case of bats. So,
okay, excellent, thank you. Next question from Clover Robichaud. Also wondering whether there's an interaction effect observed between humidity and temperature on common body shapes.
yes. I presume he's thank you, Clover. I presume he's talking about this last case of amphibians, right? Yes. Actually, there's in this part. If this is the question, there is a interesting interaction of humidity and temperature. No, I think he's talking about body shapes. So I presume he's talking about the first case, right? I don't know.
It sounds like maybe the first case study is.
Yeah, definitely. This is another layer of complexity, because the humidity interacts directly with the fur cover, for instance, and may change completely the understanding of how heat flows from the body to outside, and how water interacts with the environmental temperature, and maybe a facilitator of the heat loss, or the opposite, if it is or not wet. We can feel this when here it's in Sergipe, it's very wet, humid, and we sweat a lot. You may not see, but I'm sweating here. but for a different reason. And we feel this this effect of being wet in the heat and being wet in the cold. There are different interactions. So probably, yes, probably there's some interactions with humidity, and again, this will interact with the fur cover and the structure, the fur, the density, the length of the fur coat. So there's a whole history in this problem that we need to work. And also this also helps to answer the question of Fabricio about hidden patterns. Maybe there are a lot of hidden interactions involving all these micro processes, physical processes of water and heat transfer. Definitely, yes.
Great. It looks like there's still a lot to explore. No shortage of recent questions. Okay, another question from Rubens Bispo dos Santos. This investigation of skin resistance pattern gradient was made with all wort anurans, I assume.
Yes, no. Thank you, Rubens. No, actually, only about, I don't know, 130 species that we had information of body mass and skin resistance. This information is taken from experimental methods in the lab. It's taken in the lab. It's very delicate process to measure water loss and resistance to water loss in amphibians, in most animals, and we don't have enough information for all the species. This is a cross-species analysis where we use the only species we have information, and it's all we got actually. But so this is a relatively small sample size, but it is what it is. It's what we have.
So how many species of anurans are there? What's the proportion that you actually had data for?
I don't know. I think actually about 7,000 species, maybe over. So it's a tiny fraction.
Okay, great. Okay, and Suzanne Renner just provided a citation for allometry or a study on allometry in plants, the scientific reports, climate and symbiosis with ants modulate leaf stem scaling in epiphytes.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sidney, for coming to our seminar series. We all have had a great time listening to your talk, and we will post this again on our YouTube channel within a week or so. So please take a look at that if you would like to refresh your memory or send it to your collaborators and students. So next month we'll host Jamie Cass from Japan, and I invite everyone to please come for that seminar as well if you have the time. Thank you, Sidney, again, and till next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Sidney.